This isn't wealth. It's your funeral confetti. The champagne was still ice cold in my hand when I walked in on my wife and my boss in bed together. Just 24 hours earlier, I'd been Dylan Carter, an unemployed corporate strategist with a mortgage I couldn't handle and a marriage about to fall apart. Now I was Dylan Carter, holder of a $25 million consulting gig and quite possibly the biggest sucker in suburban Chicago. Jesus Christ, Linda. The words came out flat, like I was commenting on the weather. She didn't even bother to look ashamed. Noah Garrett, CEO of Meridian Industries, and the same guy who'd fired me 3 weeks prior, fumbled for his silk boxers like a teenager caught by his parents. My wife just pulled the Egyptian cotton sheets up to her collarbone and gave me that cold stare with those ice blue eyes that used to make me forget my own damn name. Dylan. Her voice was steady, controlled. We need to talk, do we? I set the champagne bottle down on the dresser next to her jewelry. The Cartier watch I'd bought her for our anniversary. The diamond earrings from her parents, and now apparently a new tennis bracelet I sure as hell hadn't bought her, because it looks like you've been doing plenty of talking without me. Noah finally found his voice along with his pants. Look, Grant, this isn't what it looks like. I laughed, and it sounded harsh even to my own ears. It looks like my wife is screwing the guy who destroyed my career. So, unless there's some other interpretation I'm missing, I think we're all on the same page here. The front doorbell rang downstairs. Of course, because my day wasn't complete without Linda's parents showing up for their weekly inspection of our lives. I could hear Clara Whitmore's voice floating up the stairs, as sharp and disapproving as ever. Linda, darling, why is Dylan's car in the driveway? Doesn't he have interviews to attend? Linda's face didn't change, but I noticed a slight tightening around her eyes. They don't know you're here, she said to Noah. This is perfect, I muttered. Absolutely perfect. Noah was fully dressed now, straightening his tie like he was heading into a board meeting instead of sneaking out of my bedroom. Dylan, let's be adults about this. What do you want? What did I want? 3 weeks ago, I wanted my job back. This morning, I wanted to celebrate landing the biggest contract of my career. An hour ago, I wanted to share champagne with my wife and tell her we were finally going to be okay. Now, I wanted to watch them both burn. I want you to leave, I said quietly. Both of you can figure out how to explain this to the Stantons. Dylan, Linda started. No, I held up my hand. I'm done with the explanations, the excuses, the pretending. You want Noah? You can have him, but you don't get to keep me as backup while you figure out. I turned to leave, but Noah's voice stopped me. The contract, Grant, the Meridian consulting deal. You might want to think about how this affects your future. I looked back at him. This guy who'd fired me for restructuring and was now threatening me from my own bedroom. Are you seriously trying to blackmail me right now while you're still wearing my wife's lipstick? His hand went to his mouth without thinking, and I felt a grim satisfaction watching him realize his mistake. The contracts with Meridian Industries. Noah, not with you personally, and last I checked, the board wasn't exactly thrilled with your leadership lately. I smiled, and it felt like broken glass. But please, keep threatening me. I'm sure Clara Whitmore would love to hear about your negotiation tactics. I walked out, leaving them to figure out their escape plan. Downstairs, Clara and Richard Stanton were examining my living room like crime scene investigators. Clara's silver hair was pulled back in its usual severe bun. Her Chanel suit was immaculate, despite the Chicago humidity. Richard stood by the window, hands clasped behind his back, radiating the kind of old money disapproval that had made me feel inadequate for 8 years of marriage. Dylan, Clara's greeting was icy. Still unemployed, I see. Actually, I just landed a major contract. $25 million over 3 years. I kept my voice even. Professional consulting work with Meridian Industries. Richard turned from the window. Meridian? Isn't that where you used to work before? The unpleasantness? The unpleasantness? Like getting fired was a minor social faux pas instead of a career-ending disaster. That's right. Turns out they need my expertise after all. Clara's eyes narrowed. How convenient. And where is Linda? We were supposed to have lunch. Before I could answer, footsteps on the stairs announced my wife's descent. She'd changed into a sundress and fixed her makeup, but there was still something disheveled about her. Something guilty. Mother, Daddy. She kissed them both. The picture of filial devotion. I'm so sorry. I was taking a nap. Clara's disapproval could have frozen Lake Michigan. Really, darling? You need to maintain some standards. If only she knew what standards were being maintained upstairs. Where's your car, Dylan? Richard asked suddenly. I saw it in the driveway, but there's another one in the garage. Expensive looking. My jaw clenched. Noah's Porsche. Of course. He'd parked in my garage like he owned the place. A friend stopped by, Linda said quickly. He's using our bathroom. He'll be down in a moment. Right on cue, Noah appeared at the top of the stairs. He composed himself, smoothed his silver hair, and put on his CEO mask. But I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes darted between me and the Stantons. Clara, Richard. His voice boomed with false bonhomie. What a pleasant surprise. Clara's face transformed. The Ice Queen melted into social butterfly mode, all smiles and air kisses. Noah, how lovely to see you. What brings you to our children's home? Our children, like Linda and I, were still teenagers playing house. Business, actually. Noah shot me a look that could have cut steel. Dylan and I were discussing a potential consulting arrangement. Very promising. How wonderful. Clara clapped her hands together. Finally, someone recognizes Dylan's potential. The way she said it made it clear she thought my potential was severely limited. But Noah Garrett believing in me, that was different. That was validation from someone who mattered in their world. Yes, Noah continued, warming to the performance. Dylan has some unique insights that could be very valuable to Meridian. Of course, these arrangements require a certain level of discretion, trust. The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Play along or lose the contract. I looked at my wife standing between her parents and her lover and felt something cold settle in my chest. She met my eyes for just a moment and I saw it all there. The calculation, the certainty that I would fold, that I needed this contract too much to rock the boat. She was right. Of course. 3 weeks ago, she would have been absolutely right. But that was before I'd spent 21 days eating ramen and watching our savings evaporate. Before I'd swallowed my pride and called every contact I had, begging for work. Before I'd finally caught a break with this contract, only to come home and find my wife celebrating with a guy who tried to destroy me. You're absolutely right, Noah, I said slowly. Trust is everything in business and discretion. I smiled at Clara and Richard. I'm sure you'll both be very discreet about Noah's visit today. Wouldn't want the wrong people getting the wrong idea about why the CEO of Meridian Industries spends his afternoons in our bedroom. The silence that followed was deafening. Clara's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Richard's face went through several interesting color changes. Linda looked like she wanted to disappear into the hardwood floors. Noah, to his credit, kept his composure. Dylan, I think you're overwrought. Perhaps we should discuss this later, when you had time to think clearly. Oh, I'm thinking very clearly. I picked up the champagne bottle from where I'd left it on the side table. Dom Perignon, $200 I couldn't afford, bought to celebrate a contract that was now hanging by a thread. In fact, I've never seen things more clearly in my life. I walked to the front door and opened it wide. Noah, thank you for stopping by. I'm sure you have other appointments to keep. He straightened his tie one more time, nodded to the Stantons, and walked past me without another word. But as he reached the threshold, he leaned in close enough that only I could hear. This isn't over, Grant. You have no idea what you're playing with. I watched his Porsche disappear down Maple Street, then turned back to face the wreckage of my living room. Clara and Richard looked like they'd been hit by a truck. Linda stood frozen in the middle of the room, her perfect composure finally cracking. Well, I said cheerfully, this has been fun, but I have some calls to make. Contract negotiations, you understand? I headed for the stairs, leaving them to sort out the pieces. Behind me, I heard Clara's voice, sharp with panic. Linda, what is he talking about? What bedroom? What was Noah doing upstairs? But I was already climbing toward my office, my mind racing with possibilities. Noah thought he held all the cards because he controlled the contract. The Stantons thought I was still the same desperate man who'd married their daughter for love and stayed for fear. They were all wrong. I had 25 million reasons to play this game differently now. And unlike them, I had nothing left to lose. My phone buzzed as I reached the top of the stairs. A text from an unknown number. Business and pleasure, Dylan. You should try both. CB. I stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it, but not before screenshotting it first. Game on, Noah. Game on. The Meridian Industries Charity Gala was a kind of event where Chicago's elite got together to write tax-deductible checks and pretend they cared about underprivileged children. Black tie was required. Compassion was optional. Under normal circumstances, I would have avoided it like the plague. But the consulting contract had a social clause. Attendance at key company events was mandatory for relationship building and brand alignment. Corporate speak for dance for your supper, monkey. I adjusted my rented tuxedo and surveyed the ballroom of the Drake Hotel. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over tables that cost more per plate than most people made in a week. The guest list read like a who's who of Chicago power brokers, politicians, CEOs, old money families who've been running the city since before the Great Fire. And somewhere in the sea of designer gowns and practiced smiles were my wife and her lover, probably plotting my professional demise. Dylan Carter. I turned to see a woman in her 50s approaching, champagne flute in hand and a predatory smile on her lips. Margaret Holloway, society reporter for Chicago Magazine, the kind of journalist who could make or break reputations with a well-placed paragraph. Margaret, lovely to see you. I summoned my best networking smile. Wonderful turnout tonight indeed, though I have to say I was surprised to see your name on the guest list given recent developments. Her eyes gleamed with malicious curiosity. I heard through the grapevine that you and Meridian had parted ways temporarily. I'm actually back in a consulting capacity. New contract, new opportunities. I kept my voice level professional. Sometimes a fresh perspective is exactly what a company needs. How fascinating. She leaned in closer, lowering her voice conspiratorially. And how does Linda feel about you working with Noah Garrett again? I imagine that creates some interesting dynamics at home. The question hit me like a punch to the gut, but I managed to keep smiling. Margaret Holloway didn't ask random questions. She knew something or suspected something and was fishing for confirmation. Linda's always been supportive of my career. She understands that business is business. Of course. Margaret's smile sharpened. Well, speak of the devil. I followed her gaze across the ballroom and felt my stomach drop. Linda had just entered, her arm linked through Noah. It's like they were arriving at their own wedding. She wore a stunning red gown that hugged every curve, a dress I'd never seen before and definitely hadn't paid for. Noah was resplendent in a custom tuxedo, his silver hair perfectly styled, looking every inch the powerful CEO. They were beautiful together, confident. They belonged in this world in a way I never had and never would. The conversations around us died as heads turned to track their progress across the room. I caught fragments of whispered commentary. Stunning together, don't you think? Heard he's getting divorced. Poor Dylan Carter. Must be devastating. Margaret Holloway was watching my face with the intensity of a scientist observing a lab rat. Interesting, she murmured. Very interesting indeed. Before I could respond, disaster struck in the form of Jeremy Walsh, one of Linda's country club friends and a man who'd never liked me, even when my marriage was solid. He approached with the swagger of someone who'd had too much champagne and not enough sense. Dylan, didn't expect to see you here tonight. His voice carried across the immediate area, drawing attention. Thought you'd be home updating your resume. Jeremy, I nodded politely. Always a pleasure. I bet it is. He grinned, clearly enjoying himself. Must be tough watching your wife move up in the world while you're well, wherever you are these days. The conversations around us had stopped entirely now. Margaret Holloway was practically vibrating with excitement. No doubt already composing her article in her head. This was exactly the kind of scene that would be dissected in society columns for weeks. Actually, I'm doing quite well. New consulting contract with Meridian Industries. Very lucrative. I kept my voice calm, but I could feel heat rising in my cheeks. Consulting? Jeremy laughed, loud and ugly. Is that what we're calling it now? Because, from where I stand, it looks more like charity. That's when it happened. Jeremy, gesturing expansively with his champagne flute, accidentally stumbled into me. The champagne went everywhere, down the front of my rented tuxedo, onto my shoes, splashing onto the marble floor. Oh no. Jeremy's mock concern was Oscar-worthy. I'm so sorry, Dylan. How clumsy of me. The laughter that followed was like glass breaking, not loud, not obvious, but sharp and cutting, the kind of refined cruelty that Chicago high society had perfected over generations. I stood there, dripping champagne and dignity, while Jeremy smirked, and Margaret Holloway took mental notes for her column. Across the room, I caught sight of Linda watching the scene unfold. Her face showed the perfect amount of concern, enough to look sympathetic, not enough to actually help. Noah was beside her, his hand on her lower back in a gesture that was both possessive and protective. He said something in her ear that made her smile, and I realized with crystal clarity that they were enjoying this. My humiliation was entertainment for them. Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention, please. The voice that cut through the ballroom chatter belonged to Victor Lane, former CEO of Meridian Industries, and the man Noah Garrett had ousted in a boardroom coup 2 years ago. He stood at the podium, distinguished in his perfectly tailored tuxedo, commanding the room with the kind of presence that came from decades of corporate warfare. What was he doing here? I know you're all eager to hear about tonight's charitable cause, but first, I'd like to make a special announcement about Meridian Industries' exciting new consulting partnership. My blood turned to ice. This wasn't part of the program. As many of you know, Meridian has been undergoing significant changes in recent months. New leadership, new strategies, new challenges. Victor's eyes found Noah across the room, and his smile was razor sharp. which is why I'm so pleased to announce that my consulting firm, Lane Strategic Solutions, has entered into a partnership with one of Chicago's most innovative corporate strategists. He gestured toward me, and suddenly every eye in the ballroom was focused on my champagne-soaked form. Dylan Carter brings a unique perspective to corporate restructuring, the perspective of someone who's seen organizations from both the inside and the outside. His insights into Meridian's operational challenges have been illuminating. The room was dead silent. I could see Noah's face from across the ballroom, and he looked like he'd been hit by a truck. Linda's perfect composure had cracked. Confusion, and something that might have been fear, flickered in her eyes. In fact, Mr. Grant's analysis of certain irregularities in Meridian's recent financial reports has been so thorough that we've decided to present our findings to the board next week. Irregularities, financial reports, board presentation. Holy crap. Victor Lane wasn't just making a social announcement. He was declaring war on Noah Garrett, and he'd somehow made me his weapon of choice. But enough business talk, Victor said smoothly. Tonight is about charity after all. Please enjoy the evening. The conversations resumed, but the energy in the room had shifted completely. I was no longer a pathetic ex-employee being humiliated by Jeremy Walsh. I was Victor Lane's partner, armed with information that could destroy Noah Garrett. Margaret Holloway appeared at my elbow like a shark sensing weakness. Well, this is a fascinating development. I don't suppose you'd care to comment on these irregularities Mr. Lane mentioned? Before I could answer, Victor himself materialized beside us. Up close, he was even more imposing, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, with the kind of quiet confidence that came from winning more battles than you'd lost. Margaret, always a pleasure. I hope you'll forgive me if I steal Mr. Grant away. We have some urgent matters to discuss. He guided me away from the reporter and toward a quiet corner of the ballroom, his hand firm on my shoulder. Victor Lane, he said, extending his hand. I believe we have some mutual interests to discuss. Dylan Carter, and I have to say, your timing is impeccable. Victor's smile was cold and predatory. I've been watching the situation at Meridian with great interest. Noah Garrett has made some questionable decisions since taking over my position. Decisions that have created opportunities for those willing to act on them. And you think I'm willing to act? I think you're a man who's been pushed too far by people who underestimated you. Victor's eyes flicked toward where Noah and Linda stood, now surrounded by concerned board members asking uncomfortable questions. I think you're ready to push back. He was right, of course. 3 weeks ago, I would have taken Jeremy's champagne bath and slunk home with my tail between my legs. I would have accepted Noah's affair with my wife as just another way the universe had decided to screw me over. But that was before I'd spent 21 days eating ramen and contemplating bankruptcy. Before I clawed my way back from professional death only to find my wife celebrating with my executioner. Before I'd realized that sometimes the only way to win a rigged game is to flip the table. What did you have in mind? I asked. Victor's smile widened. Why don't we discuss it over dinner tomorrow night? I think you'll find my proposal very motivating. Across the ballroom, Linda was making her way toward us, her face a mask of controlled panic. Noah was right behind her, his CEO swagger replaced by something that looked suspiciously like fear. Dylan. Linda's voice was honey over steel. We need to talk, do we? I looked her up and down, taking an expensive dress, the new jewelry, the perfectly applied makeup. Because it seems like you've been talking plenty without me. Don't be childish. This is important. You're right. It is important. I turned to Victor. Dinner tomorrow sounds perfect. Should I bring anything? Financial records, perhaps? Internal memos? The color drained from Noah's face. Grant, you're making a serious mistake. Am I? I looked around the ballroom at all the faces, watching our little drama unfold. Because from where I stand, it looks like I'm finally making the right choices. Linda stepped closer, her voice dropping to an urgent whisper. Dylan, please. You don't understand what you're doing. Noah can destroy you. He can make sure you never work in the city again. Can he? I smiled, and it felt like the first genuine expression I'd worn all evening. Because it seems to me that Noah has bigger problems to worry about than my career. I looked at my wife, really looked at her, and felt something cold and final settle in my chest. The woman I'd loved for 8 years, the woman I'd built my life around, was standing in a ballroom full of Chicago's elite, begging me to protect the man she'd been sleeping with behind my back. You made your choice, Linda, in our bedroom with my boss in our bed. Now I'm making mine. I turned to Victor. Tomorrow night it is. And Victor, I have a feeling this is going to be a very productive partnership. As I walked away, I heard Linda call my name, heard Noah's voice raise in what sounded like barely controlled panic. But I didn't look back. I had a war to plan. Victor Lane's penthouse occupied the top 2 floors of Gold Coast high-rise. with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a commanding view of Lake Michigan. The decor was understated but expensive, the kind of wealth that didn't need to announce itself because everyone already knew it was there. I sat in a leather chair that probably cost more than my car, nursing a glass of scotch that was older than my marriage, while Victor outlined his proposal. Noah Garrett is a competent manager, Victor was saying, but he's not a visionary. More importantly, he's not as careful as he should be with other people's money. Are you talking about embezzlement? I asked. Nothing so crude, but creative accounting, questionable expense reports, some very interesting consulting fees paid to companies that exist only on paper. Victor smiled. The kind of thing that looks perfectly legal until someone starts asking the right questions. I leaned back in my chair, processing the implications. And you wanted to ask those questions? I want you to do what you do best, analyze corporate structures and find inefficiencies. The fact that those inefficiencies happen to involve Noah Garrett is just serendipitous. Through the windows, Chicago spread out below us like a circuit board. All lights and connections and hidden pathways. Somewhere down there, Linda was probably having dinner with Noah, planning their next move. The thought should have hurt more than it did. What's in it for you? I asked. Besides revenge? Victor's laugh was dry. Revenge is a young man's game, Dylan. I'm interested in justice. Noah destroyed my reputation to get my job. He convinced the board I was too old, too set in my ways, unable to adapt to changing markets. Then he proceeded to run my company into the ground. Your company? I built Meridian from nothing. 30 years of my life, my vision, my relationships. Noah inherited an empire and turned it into his personal playground. Victor's voice was calm, but I could hear the steel underneath. I want it back. My phone buzzed with a text message. Linda, we need to talk. This is bigger than you think. I showed Victor the message. He read it over and gave a faint smile. She's not wrong, he commented. This is way bigger than just a simple marital spat. Victor topped off my scotch. Noah has been dipping into Meridian's coffers to bankroll his lavish lifestyle and your wife's, he revealed. The jewelry, the designer clothes, those spa weekends in Napa Valley last month that she claimed were getaways with her girlfriends. You've been keeping tabs on them. I've been keeping tabs on Noah. Your wife? She's just collateral damage. Intel wise. Victor's expression softened a fraction. I'm genuinely sorry about this, Dylan. I know this can't be a walk in the park. It wasn't a walk in the park, that was for sure, but it brought things into sharp focus. Every lie, every flimsy excuse, every single time Linda had managed to make me feel inadequate, it all clicked into place. She hadn't simply fallen out of love with me. She traded up to a newer model. So what's the game plan? I inquired. Victor produced a tablet and displayed a series of meticulously compiled financial reports. Noah has been exceptionally creative with those expense accounts, he pointed out. Private jet flights, supposedly for client meetings, that were actually romantic excursions. Hotel suites charged to executive training that were shamelessly used for personal amusement. Jewelry purchases conveniently classified as corporate gifts. I scrolled through the digital documents, my corporate strategist brain automatically and efficiently cataloging the various irregularities. The scheme was elegant in its simplicity. Nothing strictly illegal, technically speaking, but morally dubious enough to thoroughly tarnish Noah's reputation if it ever saw the light of day. The board of directors would be compelled to take action on this. The board will have absolutely no choice in the matter, I stated confidently. Meridian is a publicly traded company. Shareholders don't exactly appreciate executives who treat the company's funds as their personal piggy bank. My phone vibrated once again. This time, it was an incoming call from Jules Morrison, my best friend in the world, and the only person who had steadfastly supported me throughout these grueling divorce proceedings. Jules was an ex-cop turned private investigator, which, needless to say, made him incredibly valuable in situations precisely like the one I was currently facing. I need to take this, I told Victor. Dylan? Jules's voice was strained, laced with tension. We got a problem. A big one. I've been running that background check you requested on Noah Garrett, and I've stumbled across something you absolutely need to see ASAP. What kind of something? I asked, my gut tightening. The kind of something that neatly explains why your wife's been acting so strange lately. He paused, then added, Can you meet me at Murphy's in about an hour? Murphy's Tavern was precisely the kind of dimly lit, run-down dive bar where cops and ex-cops alike want to drown their sorrows and nurse their disappointments. Jules was already there when I arrived, hunched over a lukewarm beer in a darkened corner booth, a manila folder spread out on the table in front of him like a roadmap to disaster. Lay it on me, I said, sliding into the seat opposite him. Jules opened the folder and extracted a series of photographs. I've been following Noah and Linda for the past week. Just like you asked, he began. Most of it was exactly what you'd expect. Fancy restaurants, overpriced hotel rooms, extravagant shopping sprees. But then I saw this. He slid a photograph across the table, one taken with a high-powered telephoto lens. Noah and Linda were sitting on a porch outside a medical building, and Linda was clearly crying, wiping her eyes with tissue. Gynecologist's office. Jules said quietly, his voice barely a whisper. She was in there for 2 hours. The implication slammed into me with the force of a physical blow, knocking the wind out of my lungs. She's pregnant, I said, the realization dawning on me. That would be my educated guess. Jules confirmed grimly. And given the timeline, he shrugged, leaving the unspoken words hanging in the air. Well, you two haven't exactly been living under the same roof for the past 3 weeks, have you? I stared blankly at the photograph, struggling to process the enormity of what this meant. Linda was carrying Noah's child. My wife, my soon-to-be ex-wife, was going to have a baby with the very man who had so gleefully and carelessly destroyed my career. There's more, Jules said, breaking the silence. He produced another set of documents from a folder. Financial records, he explained. Linda's been systematically moving money out of your joint accounts and quietly funneling it into a private account that Noah set up specifically for her. She's been meticulously planning this for months. Dylan, the affair, the pregnancy, the elaborate financial arrangements. This wasn't some spur-of-the-moment indiscretion. I felt something cold and hard settle deep inside my chest, a feeling that was exactly anger, but something far more profound and unsettling, clarity. For weeks, I'd desperately been trying to convince myself that Linda had simply made a mistake, a terrible lapse in judgment, that she'd been temporarily seduced by Noah's power and money, but that somewhere deep down, she still harbored some lingering affection for me. But this wasn't a mistake. This was a meticulously calculated betrayal, planned and executed with the cold precision of a hostile corporate takeover. So, what do you want to do? Jules asked, his gaze unwavering. I thought about Victor's tantalizing offer, about the incriminating financial records that had the potential to utterly destroy Noah's career. I thought about Linda, pregnant with another man's child while still legally bound to me. I thought about Jeremy Walsh's champagne-soaked arrogance and Margaret Holloway's predatory smile, and all the subtle and not-so-subtle ways that Chicago's elite had made it abundantly clear that I didn't belong in their exclusive world. I want to burn it all down, I said, my voice surprisingly calm and even. Jules grinned, a flash of something almost feral in his eyes. Now you're talking, he said, his voice laced with anticipation. What do you need from me? Everything, I replied. Financial records, phone logs, hotel receipts, credit card statements, the whole shebang. I want to know every single lie they've told, every dollar they've stolen, every law they've bent to suit their own selfish purposes. I finished the last of my beer and stood up, feeling a newfound sense of purpose surging through me. And Jules, I added, turning back to face him, I want it all meticulously documented, carefully photographed, flawlessly recorded, and, above all, legally admissible. I may end up in court, but first, I'm going to give them one last chance to do the right thing, to salvage what little remains of their integrity. I managed a tight, humorless smile, and it felt like swallowing shards of broken glass. I'm going to offer them a deal they simply can't refuse. Back at Victor's luxurious penthouse, I found him poring over Meridian financial reports with the focused intensity of a seasoned general meticulously planning a crucial battle strategy. How did your meeting go? He inquired, glancing up from his tablet. Productively, I replied, my wife is pregnant with Noah's child, and they've been systematically siphoning money from our joint accounts to finance their new life together. Victor looked up from his screen, his expression unreadable. That complicates things, doesn't it? He observed. Or perhaps, he added, a hint of a smile playing on his lips, from where I'm sitting, it simplifies them considerably. I poured myself another generous glass of scotch, the amber liquid sloshing slightly over the rim. They've made their choice, I stated, my voice devoid of emotion. Now we make ours. What did you have in mind? Victor asked, his eyes narrowed with curiosity. I pulled out my phone and showed Victor the compromising photographs Jules had provided. Noah has been blatantly misusing company resources for his personal expenses, I explained, and Linda has been actively stealing from our joint accounts. They're both incredibly vulnerable to exposure. You want to blackmail them? Victor asked, his tone neutral. I want to offer them a choice, I clarified. Noah can resign quietly from Meridian and make full restitution to the company for his financial improprieties. And Linda can agree to a clean and uncontested divorce, with absolutely no alimony claims whatsoever. In exchange for their cooperation, their dirty little secrets stay private, locked away and never see the light of day. Victor thoughtfully considered this proposition, stroking his chin. And if they refuse, he finally asked, then we go public with absolutely everything. I replied, my voice hardening. The financial irregularities, the sordid affair, the unexpected pregnancy, the brazen theft. We let Margaret Holloway and her socialite colleagues tear them both to shreds in society pages, while the SEC simultaneously launches a full-scale investigation into Meridian's books. That would utterly and completely destroy them both, Victor observed, stating the obvious. Yes, I said, my voice cold and resolute. It would. Victor remained quiet for a long moment, intently studying my face, as if trying to discern some hidden meaning behind my words. You've changed, Dylan, he finally said. Just 3 short weeks ago, you were a desperate and defeated man, practically begging for work. Now, you're calmly discussing the prospect of utterly destroying 2 people's lives with the detached demeanor of a seasoned corporate executioner. He was right, of course. 3 weeks ago, I would have been utterly horrified by the very idea of what I was now so meticulously planning. I would have undoubtedly taken a moral high ground, filed for divorce quietly and discreetly, and attempted to rebuild my shattered life without intentionally causing harm to anyone else. But that was before I had come to the painful realization that mercy was often perceived as a sign of weakness in Chicago's cutthroat elite circles. Before I had discovered that playing fair was simply another way of saying that you were willing to lose, to be taken advantage of, to be utterly and completely crushed. They made me into this, I said, my voice laced with a bitter edge. Noah deliberately fired me to clear the path for his illicit affair with my wife. Linda married me for the perceived stability that I represented, and then coldly traded me in for a newer, more powerful model the moment one became available. They both confidently counted on me being too decent, too weak, too afraid to fight back, to assert myself, to protect what was rightfully mine. I raised my glass of scotch in a mock toast, the amber liquid swirling gently in the glass. Here's to proving them wrong, I said, a flicker of dark satisfaction in my eyes. Victor smiled, a genuine, almost approving smile, and raised his own glass in response. To justice, then, he said, his voice resonating with conviction. However it needs to be served. We both drank, and I felt something fundamental and irreversible shift deep within my soul. The old Dylan Carter, the one who had always diligently played by the rules, blindly trusted in fairness, and naively believed that good things inevitably happen to good people, was gone, replaced by someone far harder, colder, and infinitely more dangerous. Someone who was now fully prepared to teach Chicago's elite a harsh and unforgettable lesson, that there are very real and very devastating consequences for treating people like disposable assets, for carelessly discarding them when they no longer serve their immediate purposes. The war was about to begin, and this time, I was fully prepared to fight, no matter the cost.